Hey Adventurers, so today is going to be another book review. This is for Mattimeo by Brian Jacques. So Mattimeo is of course one of the Redwall books. This is it's an anthropomorphic fantasy, meaning that it features animal characters with human characteristics. It's high fantasy or epic fantasy or both, probably both, this one especially. This one's kind of a journey. It's got a very large journey element or trope to it, and there's also a bit of a passing of the torch to the next generation of characters in many ways. I'll get more into the review in a second here, but just want to quickly say if you're liking what you're seeing from an Erudite adventure, we'd really appreciate it if you would like and comment and subscribe if you haven't already. Alright, so the Mattimeo is one of the few books in the Redwall series that is a direct sequel to another book in the series, and it is the direct sequel to Redwall, Redwall was the first book that Brian Jacques wrote in the Redwall series. I think it was the first book he wrote, period. He then went back and wrote Mossflower, and from there just started building out this series in this world. So Mattimeo is not I don't even think it's one of his earlier ones that he wrote. I've never checked on that. Let's see, will it tell me real quickly? It was published 1990. That doesn't help me a lot because I don't know when Redwall was published. But anyways, so I have long considered Mattimeo to be one of my top 3 books in the Redwall series, but it had been a very long time since I'd reread Mattimeo. I think it's actually only the 3rd time that I've read Mattimeo was this reread. So I was extremely interested to see what I thought of the book on reread, see if it would still hold up to my top 3 Redwall books, and I was very impressed with it. It held up extremely well, and indeed was not only as good as I remembered, but it was possibly even better than I remembered from a storytelling perspective. From the perspective of a storyteller and as a story, I was able to look at it and be like, okay, this is not only good, but this is great. This is phenomenal. So this book there's several different storylines, as Brian Jacques usually does. He usually has about 3 or 4 or sometimes 5 different storylines that are all tied together in some way, but they are all taking place separately. This one, it has 2 primary storylines with a 3rd primary storyline and a 4th sub-storyline kind of thing. Lots of sub-stories going on throughout this book, but the 2 primary ones, the first one is that of Mattimeo and his fellow captives attempting to survive and fight back against their captors. The second primary storyline is that of Matthias and Orlando and their group going after these captors, trying to save their children, the next generation. There are other storylines as well, as I mentioned, Slagar's storyline of vengeance, the protection of Redwall from the crows, etc. All of these storylines are woven together masterfully to create a story that makes sense and where there's no convenience for the sake of convenience type things. When something happens, it affects everything else. And that's good. That's what it's supposed to do. If somebody leaves, they're not supposed to just appear back in time to save the day. They should be gone as long as they need to be gone in order to accomplish their task and get back. And if they're not back in time to save the day, well, that kind of sucks, but that's the way that things work. Slagar is also just one of the most well-developed villains, not only in this series, definitely that, but also I think that I've ever read. I'm not saying that he is the best I've ever read, I'm just saying that there's some things to his storyline, to Slagar's storyline, that are very, very well done and that I have not seen very often. So a villain storyline done this well very often. The stakes in this book are extremely high, and as always, Jacques doesn't shy away from killing characters when necessary. Nobody is safe just because they're a main character. Yes, you can kind of read the books and expect, the generic recipe, I guess if you want to call it that you get from the Redwall books is that bad guys attack, good guys save the day, and in the end the good guys won. The good guys win, and yes, that's true for pretty much all the books, but there's so much more to it than that. You don't just win without any losses or without things changing. You most of the time have a whole bunch of very important characters to the story end up dying, and it's no different with this book. I've mentioned this before, but the magic system of Redwall, of the Redwall series, is a very soft magic system. It's tied to the spirits and the memories of those who have come before, specifically Martin the Warrior and the Badger Lords quite a bit as well, but that's more for the Badger Lord storyline, or the Badger's books, than it is for the Redwall books, which they're all Redwall books, and most of the time Redwall appears in the Badger books as well. That's not important. Basically, what I'm saying is that the magic system has to do with the memories and the spirits of those who have come before. And it is utilized once again here in a way that makes sense with the world and doesn't solve the issue, but provides a way for the characters to solve the issues themselves and do it believably. And to me, that's how a magic system should work, whether or not it's hard magic system or a soft magic system. It shouldn't be, okay, we can use the magic and now the problem is solved. It should be, no, I have to solve the problem. Magic is a tool that I can use to do it, or something that can help me get to the point where I can solve it, but I have to solve the problem. And that's what Brian Jacques does with the magic system of this world. I very, very rarely read parts of books or even have quotes in my reviews from the books. But I want to read the prologue of Mattimeo just to show the quality of the writing and how well Jacques is able to use repetition. And you'll see it, you'll know immediately what I mean when I read this. But he uses repetition in a way that I rarely see done, and rarely see done well. This might take a little bit longer than I was expecting, but it's good and it's important. Obviously the audiobook narrator, Brian Jacques, narrates this audiobook, and he does it far better than I will here, but it's just amazing. So, let's see. High noontide sun beat down on Orlando the Axe. The mighty badger strode the far reaches of the western plains, blind to the beauty of the flower-carpeted grassland which had turned green to gold. Orlando the Axe was following the fox. The badger wiped a huge dusty paw across his eyes. Sun glinted off the massive double-headed battle-axe slung over his shoulder. His home lay plundered behind him. There was nothing left there except desolation and loneliness. Orlando the Axe was following the fox. 2 sunrises ago, he had passed the strange fox and his band. They had given him a wide berth as he trudged to the foothills of the mountains, seeking food and the small rock plants which his little daughter Alma loved so much. Orlando feared no living creature. He had passed by the fox, not thinking that he had left a clear trail back to his den. The following morning, he had returned home, laden with food and rock flowers. Alma was gone. His home was smashed and broken. Orlando the Axe was following the fox. 3 winters ago, his wife, Brockrose, had died, leaving him to rear their little badger cub. Alma was the most precious thing in Orlando's life. He taught her of the seasons, the plains, and the mountains. Now he had turned his back on those same mountains and plains with only one thing in his mind, to find his daughter and the creature who had taken her. Orlando the Axe was following the fox. Striding the wide spaces, the badger let a fearsome rumble start to build deep within his cavernous chest, a terrible sound that grew into a howling roar of pent-up rage and anger. It rebounded to the mountains across the sunlit plain as he shook the battle-axe aloft with one paw. His eyes narrowed to red bloodshot slits, which changed the whole world crimson in front of him. Orlando the Axe was following the fox. Just the way that he's able to use that same sentence, Orlando the Axe was following the fox, to reinforce the perspective of this character who is the main character of the book, and just really gives you a sense of what this story is going to be like. And it's just, I don't know, I think it's done very well. And anyways, let's continue on here real quick. I don't have a whole lot left of this review, but as always, I'm just extremely impressed by this series, but specifically this book in this instance. The plot, the pacing, the prose, the atmosphere, just everything about it came together to create a wonderful novel. While it may be written with a YA audience in mind, it's more than good enough to be enjoyed by a much wider audience, and the series is always diving into darker, heavier, more adult themes than you'd expect from this type of series. And of course, the audiobook for this novel, as I already mentioned, is just phenomenal. I very much highly recommend this series and this book. You could read this book as a standalone. If you don't want to read it as a standalone, or you don't want spoilers for Redwall, read Redwall first and then read this one. You could read those two books, and that's plenty to get a taste of the series and just know what you think of the series. And yes, it's written for YA audiences. Yes, it's about animals, but that doesn't diminish the storytelling in any way, shape, or form. And I absolutely love this series, and it's very much the book. I'm very happy that it lived up to my memory of it and just exceeded my expectations going back into it. Unfortunately, this was the only Redwall book that I read in 2022, and I haven't read any yet in 2023. I'm hoping to remedy that and read at least 3 or 4 Redwall books in 2023, but we will see what happens. Thank you guys for watching an Erudite Adventure. We post videos every Monday and Thursday. We have our social medias linked in the description down below. We'll see you guys again soon. Stay warm.